Judge Fields and Judge Draper, I am super, super excited and honored that you have chosen to join us this evening to discuss bail reform. I want to make this really a conversation that you drive since you were involved, and I want to sit back and learn as much as I can. So with that said, if you would like to start, and if Judge Fields, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with Judge Draper. I would love you to give an introduction of who you are and how you're involved in the bail reform process in Harris County. So Judge Draper.
Hi, everybody. Hi, ROADwomen. I'm Genesis Draper, the judge of Harris County Criminal Court at Law Number 12. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for having this conversation. There's just so much misinformation out there. And so we want to make sure that our base really understands the issue and really feels confident in the work that's being done at the county courts. And so I wanted to come here and let you hear it directly from us, to hear what bail reform is, what it looks like, how it operates, so that you can understand exactly what's going on, so that you can also kind of field all the noise that's out there. I'm one of 16 misdemeanor court judges. Prior to taking the bench, I was a public defender for 13 years. So I started with bail reform, quite frankly, as someone on the sidelines watching the lawsuit, kind of cheering it on, and then was suddenly kind of thrust into this position by appointment and later elected by you all to be able to join the lawsuit and work with my colleagues to settle it. But essentially, we were sued, rightfully so. We were sued for jailing poor people for being poor, not for being dangerous or not for being a flight risk, but simply because they could not afford to pay the tax that we charge to let people out of jail. And so we were sued, and federal courts spoke loudly and clearly in a very rare, long, detailed opinion, letting us know that we were wrong and that we were violating the law. And it super sucks to be the judge and to be told that you are breaking the law, right? And so we wanted to do all that we could to rectify that. I'm going to let Judge Fields kind of jump in here. The only thing I would add is that as we're having this conversation, one of the things that I hope to do is to make the distinction between misdemeanors and felony, right? The only bail reform that has occurred is at the misdemeanor level. So people charged with theft, minor theft, or people charged with bar fights or things like that. That is where it has occurred. The lawsuit is still very much pending at the felony level and really hasn't gotten that far. So a lot of times when you're hearing about it in the news, they're conflating the two issues. They're holding up a picture of Judge Franklin Bynum and then talking about a felony case, right? Because they're all about the misinformation. So we want to make sure that you understand that. And I'll let Judge Fields kind of pick up and add on to that information.
Thank you so much, Judge Draper. Judge Fields, you may have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I said the most brilliant thing while I was muted.
I bet you did.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mosier. Thank you so much, Judge Draper. The real pioneers of bail reform are the 16 Democratic county court judges. The one group that was against bail reform is the group that I was a part of for 20 years, and that's the Republican county court judges that were sued. I've since found the right path and joined the Democratic Party, or I should say rejoined, and gotten with the program. And I was one of two judges, Judge Daryl Jordan being the first, to sponsor this bail reform movement before it was cool to do so. And Judge Draper hit the nail on the head. And just so you have a little background about me, I was on the bench for 20 years, elected as a Republican judge. And for 17 of those years, followed the same playbook that I think everyone here on this call who was involved in our criminal justice system, probably a number of them I've been practicing for 30 years, were not involved for as long as I was. We were doing things the way that they had always been done, and they had always been done wrong. It wasn't until Judge Jordan came in, took the bench, and challenged the status quo in what I call a blatant act of bravery, and change the way our system works by getting behind this lawsuit. So this O'Donnell lawsuit that everyone is hearing about, and I'm going to give a lot of information. Some of it's going to be very basic, but like Judge Draper said, there's so much misinformation that I think it has to be cleared up, because I know that the women and men in this room who are members of ROAD are not just the people in this room. There are thousands of people in this room represented by you. And you're going to carry this message, I hope, out to that community. The O'Donnell lawsuit stemmed from a young woman who was charged with driving with a suspended or invalid license. Her bail was set at $2,500 and she didn't have the money to pay the bail. And as opposed to giving this woman charged with no violent crime, nothing that would hurt anyone, a reasonable bail, she was held in jail for several days. A lawsuit stemmed from that. And what was uncovered was a system where the rich were able to get out irrespective of their level of violence, and the poor were held irrespective of their level of nonviolence. And the number one thing that I would hope you take away from this discussion is this: money does not make us safer. Money does not make us safer. And unfortunately, we've seen that in an all too real way just recently. Money doesn't make us safer. And so I want to talk a little bit, and I don't want to just, monopolize the time. I was a politician. I'm no longer a politician, nor do I care to be one for anyone interested. But I can talk a long time, so stop me if you need to. Here is what bail reform is about. We're hearing about bail reform from the Republicans and what they passed in Austin. That is not bail reform. That is bail regression. That is taking us back to a system of bail schedules, which set bail at a set level, irrespective of your past criminal history, irrespective of whether or not you committed violent acts in the past. Just if you got the money, you get out. And if you don't get out. Bail reform is constitutional bail. In the O'Donnell lawsuit that I talked about, Judge Rosenthal laid it out very clearly. If a person is entitled to bail, and in Texas, under our Constitution, subparagraph 11 of the Bill of Rights, it says that everyone, with the exception of capital murders, where proof is evident, you got to be able to show that a capital murder was committed, is entitled to bail. And just recently, one of the most conservative judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals, Judge Mary Lou Keel, has said that if a person is entitled to bail, they must be given a bail that they can afford. And if they cannot afford any bail, then they must be given personal bond. And we're going to get to Rule 9 in just a little bit. And that's the rule that my colleagues who are currently sitting on the bench passed, and is sweeping the nation in places like Ohio from coast to coast. People are talking about what they're doing. It's very exciting. So the basic premise, what is bail? When you're explaining to people and they're saying, well, what is bail? Why can't people just post bail? There are three basic types of bail. There's surety bail, where an amount of bail is set. You can't maybe afford it all, but you can get someone to ensure that you'll post the rest if you don't show up for court. You pay a percentage, usually about 10%. The bondsman guarantees the rest, and then you're released. There's cash bail, and it is just what it says. You give up cash, you put it in the county's coffers. They hold your cash against your promise to show. And there's personal bail, where you give your personal assurance that you will show up for court. And as long as you show up for court, you're good. With personal bail, judges can use conditions of bond, which include interlock devices, monitoring devices to ensure that you get home when you're supposed to be at home. They can use GPS devices in cases of domestic violence to ensure that you are not going near restricted locations. And what we have found time and time again from studies conducted all across this nation is that while money does not make us safer, bonds where conditions are used, personal bonds do. That's what keeps us safe. And we recently saw in a report generated by our DA where they talked about all of the murders that had been committed by people on bond. What they didn't emphasize was that the least violent people were those on personal recognizance bonds, or the general order bonds that the current county court judges have approved. And that's not a narrative that anyone wants to discuss, because it erodes this premise that people on personal bond are dangerous. And I think it's important to look at this against the backdrop of how many more people are out on personal bond right now. The county court judges have made it so that everybody who can get a bond gets a bond, meaning that tens of thousands of more people are out on bail, their signature. And still, with all of those tens of thousands of additional people out on bail, the most dangerous folks you're going to run into are the ones who post money bail, not the ones who are on personal bonds, the ones who rely on money. And so we know what bail is. We know what the basic premise is. We know what the types of bonds are. Let's talk just briefly, and then Judge Draper, I'll let you talk, I promise. Let's talk about this O'Donnell lawsuit just a little bit. I'm sorry. And this consent decree that the county criminal court judges entered into. The consent decree is what has driven, and Judges Draper and I saw him on here. These little things are so small. Judge Wright and some others may be able to speak on this. Judge Gordon. The consent decree generated what is called Rule 9. It's the rule that governs how people are released from jail in the Harris County criminal court system. There are general order bonds, meaning that a single judge signs off on bonds for the least violent people so that they are shunted out of the system as quickly as possible so as not to create a backlog in jail and cost taxpayers millions of dollars. There are personal bonds, which are utilized in a majority of the cases. And then in those rare instances where you have serious violence, repeat domestic violence, violation of protective orders, there are some surety bonds. What has happened as a result of Rule 9 is that Harris County has saved millions and millions of dollars. That is not a story you're going to hear from Republicans because they want things back to the way they were. And when your friends in the community ask you, well, why would they want that? Why would they want things back to the way they were? Because bail is big business. I was the chair of the Harris County Bail Bond Board for 7 years. Bail bondsmen spend millions of dollars directing how our laws are drafted with respect to bail. They have created a system in Austin where they are virtually untouchable in terms of a person not showing up. So they post a surety bond, they don't show up. The bail bondsman does absolutely nothing to ensure their safety, and then nothing happens to them if the person refuses to appear in court, because there's so many loopholes written into that law that they're immune. Judges, on the other hand, who grant a person a personal bond are not immune because that person is under their direct care, custody, and control while they're on that personal bond. So the real responsible thing to do is the personal bond. The irresponsible thing to do is to continue to pay blood money into a surety bond system that has done nothing but lock up poor people, brown people, Black people. We have decades of human carnage caused by this system. And so it's a good thing that it has been eradicated by these judges, but it's under assault. And you see it every day in the news because we have people who don't know a lot about this system telling us that what's going on in the district courts where there is not bail reform, they're in the middle of litigation now. They have not reached any sort of agreement, and the chances that they'll reach an agreement are not forthcoming, it seems. They're not under bail reform. They're making their independent decisions. There is no uniform or unified way of going about it as there is in the county criminal courts. That's not me advocating for anyone or anything, that's just stating the fact. So now that I've done all of that talking and need a sip of water, Judge Draper.
I think the only thing that I'll add to that is that, yes, one of the reasons why it's under attack is, yes, it's big business, right? Bail is big business, but also we have benefited from this system of oppression, right? Like people pled guilty, cases moved, we didn't have to have trials. Who's going to wait around for 4 months for their trial where they were not going to serve more than a couple of days if they were convicted? Nobody. And so now people can get out, they can consult with their lawyer, they can put the government to their burden, and it slows things down significantly when people get to make some choices, when people get to actually have their cases heard. And so there are a lot of things at play. But at the end of the day, it's a narrative we're very familiar with, right? Like tough on crime. Democrats aren't tough enough on crime. They loop this same story every decade and we fall for it. We fall for it. And so we have got to really listen to what's being said, right? You know, oh, this person, they committed a crime and they were out on bond. Of course they were out on bond. Like, what? Hold them at no bond, right? But they're not going to clarify in the story, well, you know, yes, they were out on bond, but they had to be out on bond. The law requires that they be out on bond, or that no hearing was held to hold them. And they're not going to clarify all of that because they know that that's not what's going to get you to click on it. And so, you know, we just want to make sure that you understand when they conflate bail reform and spikes in crime, one is just, there's just no credible evidence to show that it's connected. But two, a lot of it is just downright disingenuous to really turn our base against the judges. Because if they can get judges, they can sweep a whole lot. I mean, we're like the bulk of the ballot. So they can sweep a whole lot of the ballot off. And so we have to fight that narrative. It was mentioned earlier, I think Tanya mentioned this, like when candidates say what they need. What we need is for our base to educate the public. I can't tell you how many times I'm in the beauty shop or I'm in the nail shop, and as soon as they find out you're a judge, it's like, ooh, what's going on with all that crime? It's like, okay, you know what? I'm about to slap somebody. So we have to make sure that we are turning around and educating. So I mean, I'm basically just gonna, you know, host a revival right there in the nail shop to make sure that people understand what it really is. And so that's what we need from you all. Whether or not you can host a house party, have me come over, I will bring the wine and cheese and we can talk about it to make sure that your neighbors, to make sure that our base, our voters, our supporters, our allies understand what this issue is and why it's being misconstrued in the media.
Judge Fields, I apologize. I muted you because there's a echo, and I wanted to make sure that for our video recording purposes, Judge Draper's words were also heard. So I apologize. It wasn't to overstep my bounds. I just wanted to make sure we were able to hear Judge Draper. I must say, as someone who was excited to have this conversation between all of us, I learned something in the first sentences both of you said, which I think says a lot for how little we all know and understand as a community. So, which is why I think this is so important. And I cannot, again, thank you enough for being here. I have a question. And again, anybody that's on this call, please put your questions in the chat so that we can ask the judges if there are things that we haven't addressed. I have a question. You're talking about having a revival at the nail salon or doing a house party. I love that. I also love getting messaging down to almost an elevator pitch, something because so many people don't want to hear it. And if I get a nice condensed something, that's what I know I can at least get in the door, get my foot in the door to start a conversation. So
Sure.
do you have, do either of you have advice on how to do that and how to have a quick, almost elevator pitch that is enlightening to the person I might be speaking to?
If I could jump in, Judge Draper, and I don't mean to step on you. I think in a nutshell, to let a person know that you're for constitutional bail for non-violent offenders. That's what these judges have been working on. That is what's going on. And I promise you that Judge Jordan would be talking, because I know he can. If it weren't for the fact that he is serving his country in the United States Army, which is why I have been sitting for him for the past year, and he really has done so much to spearhead this effort. But after you tell them that you're about constitutional bail, that you're supporting constitutional bail, just ask them and ask yourself, if the person who was granted bail had paid money, would we have been any safer? And if the answer is no, then you've said everything you need to say. And the answer is always no.
Right. And honestly, you know, when you when people have an opportunity to see themselves in the situation, then it makes it more clear. A lot of people think, well, I'll never be charged with a crime. So then they can't really conceptualize it. But, and we can't talk about pending cases. So this is not me doing that. But an example, you know, there's a candidate running for governor whose wife was recently arrested. And he was totally outraged. And, you know, so upset. And she's taken to jail. My grandchild's on the side of the road, you know, for those few hours that she spent in there. I would be willing to bet my bottom dollar he's against bail reform. But it's like, well, of course, you think your wife should get out. She should be like presumed innocent and get out and be able to fight her case. That's how everybody feels about their wife, their mother, their grandmother, their grandchild that has to wait on the side of the freeway for someone to come and pick them up while their grandmother is hauled off to jail with no arrest record, right? Like, so this, people have to really feel what it looks like in a practical sense. There are nations and countries out there where we accuse you, you know, you're accused of a crime, and all it takes is the accusation, and for somebody to come in and say what you did, and off to jail you go. We've decided we don't want to be that, thank goodness. And so we have a process. You get accused. The state has to, you know, meet their burden. And until they do, you are presumed innocent. And so we have to really kind of remind people what we've decided as a nation we want to be about and why we decided that. Because otherwise, when your mother, when your grandmother, when your pastor, especially in misdemeanor court, I tell people the funny thing about misdemeanor court, the people that come before me, especially, they are the people, the bulk of our cases are driving while intoxicated and assault family member. Those also happen to be the ones that your neighbor, your pastor, your kindergarten teacher, your daycare worker can get charged with, right? And so we don't want to make rules for those one or two off people who don't do right. What we want to do is make rules and policies that are consistent with the majority of people who come through our court, so that we can make sure that we're not ruining lives needlessly. And so, I mean, just to have the conversation, usually when we're able to sit down with people and really explain to them what this is about, because when you look at the bail reform as proposed in the legislature, it is telling you, if you have money, you're not as dangerous. That's what it's saying. If you pay the bondsman, you should be able to get out. And we have to reject that narrative that if you can pay, you're not as dangerous, that poor people are more dangerous. That is what is being said. And we have to reject that. And so I'm happy to have the conversation. You know, Crime Stoppers, those groups, they love to have a good old house party. And I think we need to do more of that. We need to, you know, it's a pandemic, I get it. So we have to meet in these smaller groups or meet on the patio or whatever we want to do, but we want to make sure that this messaging is getting out and that we nip it in the bud so that it doesn't haunt us in November 2022.
I also wanted to commend Judge Fields for telling us that he had spent 20 years in the Republican Party, which is, you know, something that I'm sure surprises many people in terms of bail, that you are such an advocate for bail reform and spent time as a Republican. I appreciate your candidness in talking about that. I personally also have a question lately to my friends who are not necessarily politically involved. They watch local news. And so they're like, for example, today there is the case of the man that was being served and he shot an officer. And so it seems like they're conflating the bail reform issue with this issue. Am I to understand, based on what you've told us today, that would not have applied in this case?
Totally unrelated. It's just totally unrelated to the conversation of bail reform. The lawsuit, the settlement, Rule 9, none of that affects in any way the types of cases, including that one, that are paraded in the news. And so, yeah, that's the best way to put it, is that is totally disconnected. But what they do is say bail reform or judges, and then it's just like, they could be talking about anybody from me to Lena Hidalgo, right? Because they don't care. They want it to sound like all judges. And so this is not to say, I want to be clear about this. This is not to say that what my felony colleagues are doing, that there's something wrong with, you know, what they're doing and who they're releasing. This is not that. But it's me saying that bail reform and the lawsuit and what has been paraded out there is not in any way connected to really almost any of the felony cases, because we're not felony cases. These aren't felony charges that we deal with.
If I can tag on to that a little bit, because I've spoken about that very issue. Not only is that not about bail reform, it was something that was completely avoidable, because the district attorney's office, if they choose to do so, under our Constitution as it currently exists, can file a document asking that a person be held for an additional amount of time on these types of serious cases where a person has violent criminal priors, where a deadly weapon is used, as we now know this gentleman did. But the DA has to do their job. That document has to be filed, a hearing has to be held, and a decision can then be made by a judge. But if all of the things that are necessary to be done before the judge gets a chance to make that decision aren't done, then we have to default back to the constitutional imperative that everyone short of capital murder is entitled to bail. And so it's easy to scapegoat and blame. It's easy to point fingers. The hard work is in making sure that everyone carries their water. Everyone carries their own load and make sure that this system works for all of us. What's so difficult, and just like I spent 7 years on the bail bond board, I spent 7 years just about on the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct. People know that judges cannot defend themselves. We can't make public statements in our own defense, and I do not ever do that, and I'm not going to make statements to defend anybody else. But I will inform people about what the law really is. But when your hands are tied and people are punching you in the mouth, sometimes all you can do is get beat up. And when they know that as a judge, you are supposed to be above that. You're not supposed to get out there and get into the fight. And so we don't. We stay back and we let people say what they have to say. Doesn't make it hurt any less. And in forums like this, where we can take the time to educate, it's so important that we do. And so I thank you and the members of this group for giving us the opportunity not to defend, but to educate. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. It has been more than an honor. I'm sure there are questions. I see Tanya has unmuted herself, which generally means she has a question. So Tanya, go for it.
I do have a question, because I want to go back just a little bit for both Judge Draper and Judge Fields. So I want to know where the lawsuit is. Like, I want to know, so not where the lawsuit is, but like, are we done with this? Or what needs to be done, and where do we insert ourselves? And what is it that we are looking for when we are listening to judges that are wanting to be reelected? Regardless, well, I'm going to go with Democrats, right? But what are the key words that I'm looking for those misdemeanor benches, right? That could be a red flag, right? That's kind of what I'm looking for, because I'm looking for, like, I like the elevator pitch, but I also want to make sure that, because I'm a brown person, I have 2 brown kids, I'm not rich. It's important to me to know that I'm being represented by the best possible person on the bench that is compassionate and that understands this bail reform and where it's left us and the work that needs to be done, the gap, I guess.
Yeah, so we're not done with it. I thought we were, after a lot of painstaking negotiations and hours and fights and arguments to settle this. I thought we were done. We entered into the settlement and the consent decree, and that was good. That consent decree is good for 7 years, which we were all proud of, right? We want to be reelected, but if we are not, we wanted a system that outlasted us, right? We wanted to make sure that the work that we were doing held on. And then the legislature came through, right? And so I say we're not necessarily done, because this legislation that has passed, there are parts of it that does run contrary to the consent decree. And so then there's the issue, okay, so what trumps what? What happens if I follow the consent decree? What happens if I follow the law? And so we really, I suspect, will find ourselves back in court having to litigate that and shore that up. As far as what to look for in candidates, one, I found, and Judge Fields and I both testified before the legislature as they were contemplating this legislation. And what I found is the writers and authors and the proponents of these bills had not read the opinion, had not read the lawsuit, really knew zero things about the lawsuit, just basic things. Mm-hmm. And had no problem admitting well, no, I just hadn't read that. No, it's no, you haven't. You wrote this legislation and did not even bother to consult any of the people who you are essentially targeting. This is written for us. This legislation was written for us. It was written to say, Harris County, we are going to lock up poor people, whether you like it or not. And he came here to sign that bill to tell us that, right? And so you really want to make sure that as people are giving their opinion about bill reform, letting you know where they stand, that they are coming from a position of information, that they know about O'Donnell, that they know about Rule 9, they know about the consent decree. And if they disagree, well, then what would you do? Pray tell, what would you do better after we've spent all these hours trying to work this out? And it's not a perfect system, right? We've been operating wrongly for so long. We dug this hole super deep. So we're not just going to climb out overnight, but we are working feverishly to do so. And I have to shout my colleagues out. There are 16 of us, and this work has been hard, not only trying to unravel it and figure it out and do the right thing, but then, there are all these attacks, and it's not just is our base going to be confused. It's not just that. That is difficult enough, but it is threats and people threatening, to find you and hoping that your family gets harmed. I mean, that's the kind of damage that's being done, that there are just people out there that are crazy. And so, I just have to shout out this 15 because they've worked so hard to do the tough work. And I'm really hoping that they will be supported by our Democrats.
Thank you, Judge Draper. If I could add in, Tanya, and I want to rephrase your question a little bit, because people are selling snake oil. They're going to come out on the campaign trail and sell you snake oil. I can't tell you what it tastes like, but I can tell you what it sounds like. It sounds like people complaining about docket sizes and not talking about a global pandemic, reduced courtroom occupation, not talking about the fact that it's very, very difficult to try a case in the criminal courts at all, because we're doing everything out at NRG. It's people who are talking about violence happening in district courts in a county court race. It's folks talking about how this person hasn't tried this many cases or done that many things, and ignoring the fact that good judges try as few cases as possible because cases are working out as they're supposed to. It's talking about long delays in trials and not mentioning the fact that there are rules and procedures in place that are causing that backlog to happen that have nothing to do with the judiciary. But the worst bitter tasting snake oil out there is that conflates misdemeanor bail reform with what's happening in the district courts. And no offense to any district court judges here, but they are just two separate things. And so if you want to know what the snake oil sounds like, it's when you start hearing those things in your meetings and in flyers and in the things that come to your home. If you see that, you can toss that in the trash. That's
amen to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Carly, I believe, I just want to interrupt. I don't know if it was an error, but Denise Brown had her hand up twice and then it was taken down. So I don't know if it was an error. Does she have a question?
I don't know. If you have a question and I haven't seen your hand go up, please, which I hadn't asked for, please put it in the chat. But if you do have a question, please ask it now. Here we are.
It was an accident on the iPad. When I raise my hand, it raises the hand on the Zoom. So it was just an accident.
Oh, no problem. I just want to acknowledge it. Thank you, though.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Keeping us honest, Adonica over here. I appreciate that. Are there any other questions for these two amazing judges who have given so freely of their time? Now's the time to ask. Here we are. We're all fired up. Anybody? Tanya?
I'm going to put my information in the chat also, so you can also reach out to me at any time.
And if we have any of the misdemeanor judges on here that would like to say anything, please chime in. We want to hear from you as well.
All right. If not,
Well,
just briefly.
if you're going to give me an opportunity to talk, I'll go ahead, Toria.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want.
raise your hand. Everybody, if you want to talk, and you're especially the judges, raise your hand. For all candidates, at the end of this, we will allow introductions. We definitely want everyone to be able to hear from you. Trust me, I have not forgotten you all. Go ahead, Judge.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much, Road Women. But I really just wanted to give a comment, quite honestly. I wanted to thank my colleagues and Road Women for putting this on and presenting such a thorough and truthful presentation. Judge Fields and Judge Draper hit the nail on the head. And for me, in a lot of ways, it was therapeutic because they're absolutely right. You know, many times we get punched in the face and we're trying to be above the fray, or as our First Lady would say, or former First Lady would say, you know, when they go high, when they go low, you go high. But going high is really difficult, and it could compromise a lot of good judges that are doing the right things. And so, again, great job, judges. And Road Women, thank you so much. But yes, I am Judge Toria Finch. I am the presiding judge of Harris County Criminal Court at Law Number 9, and I am so proud to be a part of that group. Thank you so much.
Great. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Judge Finch. Judge Singer?
Judge Jordan, if I could just say real quick, Judge Jordan put in the chat a link to the O'Donnell Monitor Report. We are being monitored. All the work that we're doing, the progress, the failures, everything is being monitored by an independent group, and they are reporting on that every 6 months. And so they show a lot of the stats, whether or not people are reoffending, whether or not they're engaging in violent crime while on bond. And so those reports are readily available for you to see. And so he's linked that there under Daryl Jordan. You can see the links to that.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Judge Jordan.
Thank you so much. Next up, Judge Singer.
Yeah, you're going to give me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to take it. Thank you very much for this forum, because this subject is something that's being used against us politically every day. And by the way, my name is David Singer. I'm your incumbent judge at County Criminal Court number 14. Also proud of my colleagues, the work that we did back in 2019. I think Judge Jordan and all the other judges could tell you that this is something that took 16 judges. And I think that's also to the person that asked the question about where we go from here. Well, we're going back to federal court. I think it's just a question of time, because there is a conflict between the new legislation and our consent decree. And we're going to have to figure out how that's going to go and get some direction from the federal court. And it's probably going to be appealed. So this is something that's going to be ongoing for some time. I just want to assure the group that the current group of judges, your elected incumbent Democratic judges, are going to fight for tooth and nail to keep in place the ending of the money bail system for low-level misdemeanors. So that's what we intend to do. And that's why I think it's important for everybody to support your incumbent elected Harris County Democratic judge.
Thank you so much. I am
County Court 14.
Thank you so much, Judge Singer. Next, I have a hand up, Judge Baldwin.
Good evening, everyone. I really just wanted to come on and thank my colleagues for giving what is always the most important thing, telling the truth, giving truth to power to truth. Again, like I would say, Judge Draper said, we really are, in our offices, in our courts, trying to do our jobs. And in the background, trust me, we're like this, but we're screaming and shaking and pretty upset at some of the things that are happening. But we do intend to be out here and educate the public as much as possible. I will echo the fact that we need your help, because we cannot reach 4.5 million people in the county. So we definitely need your help. I too placed the link to the monitor's report. Don't be afraid of how large it is. The beginning stages of it is a summary. You could actually read the summary. It will give you some statistics as well. And they are very relevant to this subject. So please check that out. My name is Judge Shannon Baldwin. I am your presiding judge for Harris County Criminal Court at Law Number 4. I am seeking re-election in 22. I am asking for your support and your vote. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And everything that's been put in the chat, I have the chat log. So if you need the link and you missed it, please feel free to reach out to ROADwomen on social media or me personally, and I'll pass that along. Judge Walker.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you all. My name is Judge Walker. I'm the presiding judge of Harris County Criminal Court 11. And quickly, I just want to talk about two big impacts of the consent decree and the procedures and policies the misdemeanor judges have done over the past, 2.5 years or so. So a big impact, of course, as Judge Draper stated, is that a lot of folks now get an opportunity to actually have a full processing of their case. Instead of just pleading guilty quickly to get out, they have an opportunity, to go home, return to work, return to school, have their attorney actually conduct a proper investigation into the case. If the case is no good, then hopefully the DA will just go ahead and get rid of it. If it is a good case, they'll have maybe a chance to get deferred adjudication, pretrial intervention, things that can allow them to not have a conviction that go on their record. And there was a whole class of folks who didn't have this opportunity until Rule 9 in the consent decree came about. So people are certainly being helped in that respect. Also, we worked on a lot of other things to help people that are receiving personal bonds and general order bonds, make sure, they come back to court. We've redone our reset forms. We have better information for people on there in terms of returning back to court. We worked with monitors, the design team on getting some new documents in place. So there's a lot of things that have come out of this lawsuit, not only just changing the bail system, but some other aspects that have made the system better for everyone that's accused of an offense. So there's a lot of things that have come into play, and we all want your support so we can continue these activities for another 4 years at least. And again, my name is Judge Cedric Walker. I'm the presiding judge of Harris County Criminal Court number 11. Thank you all.
Thank you, Judge Walker. I appreciate that. Great points made by our judges. And our last judge that's a sitting judge that will be, I guess, commenting or questioning, Judge Wright.
Hi, quickly, everybody. My name is Andrew Wright. I'm the judge at Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 7. But we were talking about some quick talking points. There's a couple of things. We're getting killed in the messaging department from the far right. Frankly, I'll just admit that, because what they're trying to do is they're marrying this idea of bail reform and people being on bond committing offenses. I'll tell you, I was a defense attorney for over a decade. I'm board certified. I've been doing this a while. I know what I'm doing, but that's not a new phenomenon. But now the news is reporting, oh, so-and-so is on bond, instead of just, hey, this happened. So that's what's killing us. But think about where it's coming from. It's coming from industries like the bail bond industry. In 2015, I put it in the chat, just in case people couldn't see it. In 2015, over $132 million worth of bonds were posted on misdemeanor cases in Harris County. Typically, bail bonds charge about 10%. So that's $13.2 million that bail bonds made on the backs of people in the community. In 2020, it was about $13 million of bonds posted. So that means they made about $1.3 million. So if you think about that, they've got $11.9 million to be upset about. So things like that are the real reasons that we're getting hammered. And look, all of us knows there's political cost, there's capital, but we did it because it was the right thing. We're going to continue to doing the right thing because that's what y'all elected us to do it for. I don't think there's a single one of me and my colleagues that is afraid of the consequence of doing the right thing. The time is always right to do what's right. And if I die from that politically, it is what it is. But hey, we did the right thing. We put a system in place that hopefully people like the legislature can't come back and screw up, so we can continue to make sure that the people of Harris County get their job, get their day in court. And that backlog, sometimes the backlog is a problem, but a lot of times that backlog means justice is served. So let's not just let them scare us with the boogeyman of the backlog. It's not always something that is pretty, but if the true measure of success is docket numbers, that's a whole different ballgame. We would have kept everybody in jail and crammed them in. It's a measure of justice and fairness to everybody in the system. That's what we're about.
Thank you for your point, Judge Wright. Judge Fleischer, did you have something to say? Did I miss your hand? I thought I saw it. Maybe not. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up this part of our meeting. Judge Draper, I cannot thank you enough for being here. Judge Fields, I cannot thank you enough for making time to be here. Judge Jordan, Thank you for serving this nation. Thank you for recommending such amazing speakers and for really being a driving force on this incredibly important issue. I am beyond grateful for the three of you being able to make time to be with us and to educate us. And trust me, I will be reaching out to all of you to answer questions and help us. And perhaps we can do one of those amazing house parties sometime soon and have a real in-person hands-on discussion about this. Do you have anything to add before we move on to our next part of our meeting?
Just thank you for having me. I love being with you all. Thank you for having this discussion, for having me. And I'll see you out in the streets.
Judge Draper, thank you so much.